What is up, y'all? It is your girl, Jice, and we are back with another episode of Boss Up with BBI. Y'all know we are here to talk about all things money and mindset in the Black community. So today I want to talk about some rental strategies. And ultimately, what I want to talk about is creating additional sources of income and additional sources of, or really additional resources for us, I should say. So I want to get into that. Before I do, I want to invite you to please subscribe, please share, consider supporting this podcast. All of those things are necessary in order for us to keep it going. And so, make sure that somebody knows about this. As I mentioned, we're talking about money, we're talking about mindset, and those things specifically dealing with our community and our people. And so I want to make sure that the information gets out there. So I would love if you would hit that subscribe button. I would love if you would share out this information. If you have questions, please drop them in the comments. I actually get a lot of people who will email me or go into Messenger and message me a question and I'll answer them. But if you drop your question in the comments, I can answer them because someone else may have that question. And so then, we can share information with the community. So, what else do I need to tell y'all today? I want to remind you to go to the to text BlackAgenda to 484848, and you can stay up to date with what's going on there. And of course, we are on tour right now, so you can always go over to the BlackAgenda on tour to find the next date and city where we're coming close to you. Don't be afraid to travel for the information, for the good time, for the fellowship, for the unity, for the community. You can do all of that. So make sure that you go over to the BlackAgenda on tour and you can get more information about when we're coming to a city near you. All right. And then last but not least, certainly not least, listen, if you want to, connect with me, if you want to have some deeper conversations, if you have questions around what's going on in your world and in your business around homeschooling, intentional living, how to be productive, things of that sort, parenting, you can connect with me at Patreon at Grind with Jice. And so I have a couple of different levels there, but you can connect with me via our private Facebook group. There's some additional workshops and trainings and some other perks that are in there. So make sure that you head over to Patreon at Grind with Jice. And of course, all the links are in the description. So now that I have plugged all of those things, let's get into it. Let's talk a little bit about this. So I want to talk about rental strategies because, of course, when we think about different ways that we can build wealth and ways that we can, begin to pass on something tangible as a legacy and as building intergenerational wealth specifically, there's a few different ways to do that, right? So business ownership is one. You cannot pass on your job, but you can pass along your business. Let me throw in a caveat there. You can pass along a business that has value and a business that has systems and a business that someone can actually take over. So if you are your full and entire business, if the whole entire business rests solely upon your shoulders, we got to work on that, right? So we got to get into a place where your business can be sold off or passed on. But nevertheless, business ownership is a pathway to wealth. Some of the other ways that you can, things that you can pass on, like life insurance policies, or things that you can leave over to your family when you die. You can also look at stocks, right? So stocks are ownership though, right? So you can pass on investments. And so there are a lot of different things that you can pass on and multiple ways that you can build wealth. But one big one that we talk about often is real estate. And a lot of times people are not quite sure how to get into real estate. So this is another kind of technical video, but what I'm hoping for is that for those of you that are thinking about getting into real estate, wanting to get in real estate, maybe you've been in it and didn't have a great or successful time. And I want to, be able to provide some insight into that. Sorry, y'all, my dog. But I want to be able to get into and provide a little bit of information on that as well. And, really just, get into how you can use real estate as a passive income stream, and as well how you can pass it along. So with that being said, I'm going to talk about pretty much 5 different rental strategies. Now, I want to start off with what I believe is like the simplest one. It's something that you can do pretty much wherever you are. Now, as a landlord, I'm going to say this with caution, but I'm also just going to be like, I'm just going to keep it 100% real with you and just tell you how I think we should do things, right? So the first way that I want to talk about rental strategies is with roommates or rooms for rent. So I've mentioned multiple times before, I mentioned this in my live streams on YouTube. If you're not following me on YouTube, go ahead and follow me over there. But I mentioned this in multiple places, in multiple spaces, that I have had roommate situations for pretty much all of my adulthood years. And those roommate situations have allowed for me to bring in additional income, cover expenses, and things of that sort. So if you have extra rooms, and I try to pretty much always have a space where I have at least an extra room, right? And the way that I look at things is like, let's say, for example, when I first, well, actually, let me back that up a little bit. Let me think about how I want to frame that. So when I moved from Georgia to Colorado, I had a 1-bedroom apartment, but it was me and my daughter, right? So at that time, I didn't stay there long at all. But at that time, what I actually did was I put my daughter inside of our dining room, and I had the bedroom, and I had my office set up in my living room. But the very next space that I moved into, and that was kind of my launching pad for moving here to Colorado. I didn't necessarily know what to expect. I wanted to make sure I was a little bit conservative. I didn't know anyone at the time. But previously, when I lived in Georgia, I did also have roommates. So like my previous place before that, I had 3 bedrooms. And so me and my daughter had a bedroom each, and then I rented out my 3rd bedroom. So moving here to Colorado, didn't necessarily know what to expect, and I was just getting on my feet. So I didn't start off with that strategy. But the next space that I moved into, I had a 2-bedroom and a study. Now, in most leases, it actually tells you that you cannot rent to other adults. It tells you that you cannot sublease. That is a pretty typical lease term in there. So when you go about this, strategy, I'm not going to act like there's not any risk involved. This is not legal advice in any way. I might throw that caveat out there a couple of times, but I feel like, we have to have those discussions around what are real applicable ways that we can gain additional income, right? So, and I'm going to tell you about a few of the risks involved. And again, feel free to use the comment section, like if there's something else that you've experienced, or, maybe you're a landlord and there's things that you've thought about, or whatever the case is. But this is just the way that I see things, and a little bit about my experience. So here's how you do this, right? You have an extra bedroom. Maybe you own the home. Maybe you rent the home. Maybe it's an apartment. To me, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, what we want to do is make sure that we're not taking on the full burden of the cost of where we're living. Now, I've always signed on to a lease by myself. I've never put a roommate on my lease, because at the end of the day, I consider myself to be responsible for the space. So again, I am a landlord, and I get what that means in terms of making sure that your space is safe, making sure that your space is livable, making sure that it is not damaged, right? So all of those things come into play. So I have never signed on any of my roommates onto my lease. They have been my leases, and then I have assumed the risk for anyone who I bring into my home or into my space. And I secure that with a lease agreement or a roommate agreement. I'm going to talk a little bit about agreements after I go through these 5 strategies, but the overview of that is that an agreement must be in place. An agreement must cover how much it's going to cost, when you're going to pay, what the late fees are, what the general, house rules are, the terms and conditions, damages, how the property or how the space was when you got there, and how you're going to leave it when you leave, right? And what I like about the roommate type of situation is I've always put in place certain things like how to govern the common areas. So if there are 2 of us using the kitchen space, like I'm an adult, you're an adult, I'm not going to clean up after you, right? So I have like general rules for common areas. If there's a powder room, right, you may have your bathroom. I'm not looking in your bathroom. You keep that how you're going to keep that. I'm going to keep my bathroom. I'm going to keep my bathroom. But if we have like a half bath or a powder room or a main bathroom or a shared bathroom, and that's happened before. When I was in Georgia, we only had one bathroom, so there was a shared bathroom. Then we're going to govern how that's going to look, right? So, and I'll talk a little bit also about screening, so that will come a little bit later as well. But some of these things may feel a little bit uncomfortable, but what I will tell you is that a lot of it is about screening and thinking about who you're bringing into your space, being very comfortable, having a good vibe, being able to feel someone's energy. That may sound like very intangible, right? But I just want to be honest. If you find that you're like really bad at reading energy off of people, like you constantly come into contact with people, you think they're great people, you find out they ain't shit, you need to work on your ability to like feel energy and be in tune. And it's not to say that somebody can't, beat your sense of intuition, but overall, you should be able to have a general sense of, if you feel good about someone or you don't, right? And if you don't feel good about someone, you need to listen to your intuition. Okay. And I'm not suggesting that you go purely off of intuition at all. I'm just saying use intuition as a tool in addition to your screening and other things like that, which we'll get into. But you can go ahead and rent out your space, rent out your rooms. You want to take a look at what's applicable in your area. So you can go on to something like a Craigslist, find out what people are renting rooms for. They have other apps and things like that, but you can basically go on and do a little bit of research around your area to find out what people are renting out rooms for and basically what you're including in that. So I've had situations where it's been all inclusive. I don't have cable now. I haven't had cable for a while, but for a long time I did. And so if I was providing like cable, internet, gas and electric, water bill was covered, trash bill was covered. I know everyone doesn't have trash, but trash bill was covered. Like that's a higher price for all inclusive than it is for if we're going to split all the household bills and you're literally just paying for the room and then everything else is getting split up equally. So at that point, I'm like, every month I'm writing, and I've gone both ways. Every month I'm now writing down what all the bills are. And I'm saying, okay, well, this month the electricity was this amount. This month the water bill was this amount. And so, some bills are pretty stable. Usually things like cable is pretty stable, or usually things like internet is a pretty stable bill. Now, I did have a time, and this, there are learning lessons, right? And so I don't think that they're necessarily like failures. They're just things that I learned. There was one time that I was like, oh, well, the cable bill is included. I mean, the cable bill is split, but I had a roommate that would always order movies. And so then we had to have like a whole discussion, like, look, I'm not paying for your movies. So we're going to split the basic bill, and all these movies you ordered, you're going to have to pay for those, right? So, and then it was like, if I ordered a movie, now we had to go through and look at the movies to see who ordered what. So sometimes if you do that split, it may be a little bit more equitable, but it also may be a little bit more, heavier work, right? You got to sit down and actually go through the bills. I ended up moving over to an all-inclusive and basically doing like an average of what I know the expenses to cost. Some of the pros and cons of that are, obviously it's a little bit easier for me to just charge you one amount per month, and then I take care of the bills however they may fall. The other side of that is that sometimes, depending on your roommate, right, you're not as conscious about things like water usage or electricity like you are when you're paying for half of the water usage or the electricity. So those are just some things to think about. Again, not necessarily a right way or a wrong way, but a way for you to think about that. If you want to be sure that that person is paying half, then you can definitely go in and calculate out all those bills every month, split it in half, make that the deal. Here's your base rent, here's the utilities, and that'll change month to month, right? If you want to simplify it, you just do it all inclusive and say, this is the monthly rent. It's going to be a little bit more expensive than what you would just charge for the room, obviously, but it makes it very cut and dry and easy for you. You need to think about how you want to do your late fees. You want to think about if you want a grace period. Just know that if you do a grace period, people are going to use it. So if you say, oh, the rent is due on the 1st, but it's late on the 3rd, or after the 3rd or the 5th, right? Typical rental terms, like people are going to wait until the 3rd or the 5th most of the time. So those are just things to keep in mind, but it is a way for you to cover down on your expenses. Depending on the situation, it can even cover your whole mortgage. When I bought my first home in Aurora, Colorado, my mortgage, I want to say my mortgage was something around the tune of like $900. And my first renter, I was charging $1,100. So there was a point in time that I wasn't paying any mortgage at all out of my own pocket, right? So depending on what your numbers are and depending on what rents are going for in that area. The reason why I was able to do that, by the way, I had purchased a 5-bedroom home. At the time, it was just me and my daughter. So I was able to have my daughter's room, my office space. And in my basement, I actually had 2 additional bedrooms and a bathroom, and I had the entire basement was finished. So basically it was like she had a living space, she had 2 bedrooms, she had her own bathroom. So it was like a mini apartment, right? And we shared basically the kitchen, the backyard, right? But it wasn't like she was chilling in my living room. Like we didn't have a shared living room. I had my living room, she had her living room. So I was able to charge a little bit more. So just recognize, like, I've been in multiple different roommate type of situations, and you can do that. So again, I mentioned that landlords do not like that. As a landlord, I do not like that. But what I will say is that whoever I sign my lease to, at the end of the day, that is the person who I'm holding responsible for the property, right? So now let me flip back to my tenant days, right? So my tenant days said that I might lease out the space to somebody else. I am in violation of my lease. That is accurate. Whether it's an apartment or a house that I've leased, I would be in violation of my lease. I take on that full risk. So I'm screening you as a tenant to make sure that I think you're safe and you're good. I am making sure that, that you're not out of order. If you are, like, I have a very quick way, basically to release you. If we get into it, I can take you to court. Most likely you would have to leave because you're in violation of basically, like, legally you're not allowed to be there. So, like, you're going to have to go, but I'm going to be liable for the damage that you've done, right? So I just recognize that I'm liable for that when I let you in. So that's my risk assessment, right? So that might be if you're renting, that might not be a strategy you want to do if you are not okay or comfortable with that risk. The other way to do that is just to literally put your roommate on the lease and make both of you liable for the space. But, that would be the legal way to do it. So let me also offer that out there. If you are renting, you can then legally go and put someone on your lease, and that makes it the legal way. So it's not that I'm advocating for you to break your lease or anything like that. I'm just telling y'all how to bring in some extra income, lower your expenses, which at the end of the day helps you move on. Right now, is that rental strategy a strategy that you can use to pass on wealth? No, if you're renting. Yes, if you own. So there you go. But nevertheless, it is a rental strategy. All right. Hopefully that was fairly thorough. Again, I'm gonna cover, the lease agreements and things like that, but hopefully that was fairly thorough in like a roommate or a rooms for rent type of situation. Now, multifamily residential, this is like my favorite, quite frankly, because from a legal standpoint, a residential house is up to 4 units. Now, that depends on the state. There are a couple of places that have up to 3 units. So basically a triplex is what they would consider multifamily residential. And when you click over to 4 units, they consider that commercial. Most places are not like that. Most places consider 4 family units a multifamily residential. Now, here's the beautiful thing about multifamily residential. It's still a residential space, which means that you can purchase it just like you would a single family residence. So that's a duplex, triplex, and a quad. Some call them 4-family flats, some call them quads, however you call it, whatever part of the country you're in. But essentially, a unit that holds 4 families, 3 families, or 2 families, all of those are multi-unit residential. That means that the same type of loan that you would take out in order for you to purchase a single family home is the same type of loan you can take out to purchase that multi-family residential. There's a few different ways that works. If you have renters that are in the space, if you have leases in place, like let's say if I'm selling my house, it already has renters in it, I already have leases on it, you can use that income as a part of your income when you're applying, which means that you can apply for essentially a bigger loan, right? So let's say if you found like a 4-family flat, it was $500,000, and you're saying, I can't afford $500,000. Well, if there are 2 renters or 3 renters already living in the space, you can use those leases in place to boost up your income so that you can qualify for the higher amount of the home. So don't always be turned away by simply by the cost of the home, depending on the situation. If it's already empty, that might not apply to you. But talk with the mortgage broker about it, because there are ways to use the income from the property with your income in order for you to qualify for a larger loan amount. Okay. But ultimately with the 4-family flat, or with a multifamily residential rather, in general, the advantage there is that you get to have rentals, right? You can live in 1 unit, you can live in 2 units, right? You can live in more than 1 unit, but you have the ability to rent out the other one. And some of them come in pretty decent sizes. Like there are 4-family flats, 3-family or triplexes and duplexes that have like 3 bedrooms. I've seen some duplexes have 4 bedrooms. I rarely see tri or quads have more than 3 bedrooms. Like I've rarely seen you have like I don't even think I've ever seen, actually, let me say that, like a 4-bedroom, like a 4-family 4-bedroom, right? I don't see that. My 4-family that's in Michigan is, all of them are 2 bedrooms. I see some of them with 3 bedrooms. I have never seen them with 4 bedrooms, but I have seen duplexes with 4 bedrooms. So just kind of keep that in mind, depending on the size of your family, what that looks like, right? But obviously the more bedrooms, the more you can charge for rent. So those are things that you should just be, looking at. But if you are in a position or you're looking to qualify to own your own home, I would consider getting a multi-unit residential property and rent out your other units. At least 1 or 2 other units, and that will help remove some of that liability, and you can write off all the expenses in there. You still get the same tax deductions as you would if it was a single family home. So there's a lot of benefits in getting a multi-family residential property. I think that's it there. All right, the next one is commercial. Now, this one I'm not going to give too many details on. In full transparency, because I'm not a commercial resident, I'm not a commercial rental expert. And so if there is enough interest, if you guys want to know some more about commercial, like we can get an expert on, because I know a few. But for the most part, what I just want to let you know is that you can also purchase commercial. And specifically, if you want to use the commercial to live in and rent out for like office space, or if you want to get like say you want to get a building, you want to run your business, like stores. When I was growing up, there was a corner store over there in East Oakland. The family actually lived on top, and the bottom was the corner store. Very small corner store, but it was a corner store nonetheless. All of us kids could go get ice cream and chips and candy and soda and all of that, right? And then they lived upstairs. So I'm sure many of you have seen that. Sometimes you may have like a deli or a bodega or something at the bottom, and then the family or the owners live up top. Okay, that's like commercial mixed use space. And then you can also find places that have, multiple spaces where maybe there's maybe you take up a space for your business, but you also rent out a few other commercial spaces. You may have living space. So that's called mixed use space. And if you're going to get into commercial, especially as a beginner, I would recommend going with the mixed use space, because that gives you a little bit more flexibility about what you can do with the space. If it's like fully commercial, oftentimes you can't you can't live there because it's commercial, it's for renting, it's for retail or things like that. But when you get it zoned, or if it's zoned like mixed use, that's like the best space because there's a lot of flexibility in what could be done inside of that space. The requirements are a little bit different. You don't qualify the same way that you would for a residential space. But if you have saved up some money, or you're, maybe you have, flipped something, or had an investment, or had a 401k, or wherever you pull the money from, you can take that and get the 30% down. Now, what it does do, it also works the same way as residential by being able to use currently existing leases in place as a part of your income. So again, if you're looking to buy it from someone who has already like done the work to get tenants and leases and things like that in place, you can take that information and you can use it. Take that income and you can use it as a part of your income. So those are just things to be aware of in terms of how you can qualify for some of these things that maybe on the upfront side, you don't qualify for based on your income. So, again, I don't have like nearly as many details about that as I would with like the roommate situation or a multifamily residential situation, because I have not done that myself, but it is a strategy that I'm looking to get into, and it's a strategy that I'm aware of. So I want to share that strategy with you. And again, mixed use or multi-use space is like the best type of zoning because of the flexibility there. And so you can still use it as a place to live and a place to work and a place to rent, all at the same time. All right, so now this is a newer one, but it is certainly one, which is the Airbnb strategy. So with Airbnb, there's a couple different ways you can do that. Let's say you get that mixed use, let's say you get that multifamily residential space, right? You can turn one of those units into an Airbnb unit, which if you are in a place that gets a lot of tourism or that has, a lot of attractions and you're a great host and all of those things, it can actually make you more money. You can like remove the cap off of your rental strategy, right? So what do I mean by a cap? I always like to explain things for people just in case you're not familiar. Like, this is a place for us to learn. So for those of us that are a little bit more advanced, work with me as I explain to those who are kind of in that 101 stage what certain things mean, because we all got to know. So what I mean by cap, so let's say you have a 4-family unit. Hypothetically, if you rent out each unit for $1,000, that's a cap at $4,000 is what your income is. There may be a few other things you can do to uncap your income, like you might put in something like washer machines. And so now if I want to wash my clothes, I'm going to feed the machine, and that may be another source of income. But by and large, if I have 4 units, they're $1,000 a piece, my income is capped at that $4,000. That's what I mean by a cap. There's really no way for me to make more than $4,000. However, let's say I do like, I live in one unit, maybe I make 1 or 2 of my units Airbnb. Would I make less than $4,000? Sure, I could, but I also have the potential to make more than the $4,000, because in 1 week, maybe I would get $1,000 from somebody renting my unit for a week. And if that is more than what I would get in a month, I might make $4,000 or $5,000 off of 1 unit. Whereas had I just rented it out as a rental, I would have only made the $1,000. So that's like uncapping your income, right? Because there's some flexibility there. So now, pros and cons of that. When you cap your income, you fill your space, you kind of have a really solid idea of what you're going to make each month. Yes, things can happen. Yes, someone cannot pay you, but we're just going to talk about best case scenario. You know what you're going to make. Now, on the other side, when you uncap your income, that means that you have some flexibility and some fluctuation. So if you have a bad month or you get a bad review, something like that, that can actually, change the circumstances of your income on that uncapped side. So again, those are just things to think about. You can make more money, but you can also make less money. And on the cap side, you can make some money, but then there's going to be a level at which there's really not anything else that you can make past that. So, but when you're thinking about that, Airbnb is a strategy. You can also do that in a mixed use space. And then you can also do that in a roommate space, or just have like a room out for rent for Airbnb. And there's a few different models for how you want to do that. If you want to be in the home when people are in the home, or if you don't. You can also do Airbnb in a space where you can do like, someone coming in on vacation, so they're renting it out for 2 or 3 days or a week. And then you can also do like longer term Airbnb where it's kind of a month-to-month lease. So those things do exist. So if you're looking for like a month-to-month space and you want to have it a little bit more, what am I looking for? Security around your processes. Like you can go the Airbnb route and, basically you can facilitate your month-to-month lease through Airbnb. So that is another rental strategy. That is certainly a newer strategy, but it's one nonetheless. So there's that one. Now, the last one is also going to be one I'm not going to get in too deep on because I want to just be able to present these as ideas that I think the Black community should consider. So the last one is around housing co-ops. Now, basically, there are 3 different ways that you can do a housing co-op, and I'm going to go through them really quickly. One is a non-equity. That is basically saying the cooperative has purchased it, but the people who are living there don't own it, but they have occupancy based off of a lease. And the benefits there are kind of like a shared cost, right? That could be, so let me think about what that would look like. So let's say, for example, you saw like a 6-unit apartment complex. That's going to be commercial, right? Because it's over the 4 units, so that's commercial. So let's say you saw a 6-unit apartment complex. You can go in and put it basically inside of a cooperative, and you can rent it out to 6 people or rent it out to 5 people, and then you're in there yourself. But when you do that, they do not own the property. The cooperative owns the property, and they're on a lease basis, right? So there's no equity involved here. But what can happen is when they get ready to leave, the cooperative has the ability to pick and choose who gets to move in. So when we're thinking about like how we create housing opportunities for ourselves, that's a place where you can basically be discriminatory in how you bring people into the cooperative. So yep, I meant exactly what I said. That's a space for being discriminatory if you want to, right? You don't have to, but it is a space where if we wanted to maintain a Black community, a Black space, if we wanted to maintain the ability to make sure that we had access to, decent housing prices or housing costs, that would be an avenue that we could use where someone cannot, pretty much they cannot sue us because we didn't let them in based off of whatever, right? We can set our own criteria. Maybe one of those criteria is the fact that you're Black. I don't know, just throwing it out there. All right. So the second one is equity-based. So it's really the same thing, but in this case, there would be equity ownership. So for example, let's say using that same 6-unit apartment complex, but now every person who is bought in is a member of the co-op and they own the unit they live in. So then when they want to move and they want to sell, you have to figure out what that looks like in terms of the equity if they sell their unit. But again, it maintains like that control. And you would have to think about how that appreciation goes, right? So there's like monthly cash flow, which basically means that you get to live in this apartment, you share in the cost of maintaining the apartment, but then there's also going to be appreciation. Maybe you bought it for $500,000, now it's worth $700,000. So what happens when that one person wants to sell their unit, how those proceeds get divvied up or what that looks like, that's something that has to happen basically inside of the structure of how you do it, but there's a lot of flexibility there for you to figure that out. So doing those as cooperatives. Then the last one is basically another roommate situation, but being done as a cooperative. So you can purchase a home under a cooperative, and then you can rent out the rooms to people, and those people essentially form the membership of the cooperative, and then they share ownership in all the common space. So it's another roommate situation, but under a cooperative, which is jointly owned or oftentimes jointly owned and can still be passed along to your children. In a lot of cases, not every case, but it depends on how you work it out. So, all right, that was a whole lot. But again, like I said, we're talking mindset and money, and I really want to make sure that we're just drilling in. Like, here's ways that you can make money. Here's ways that you can bring in passive income streams. Here's ways that you can begin to pass along real estate. Here's ways that you can lower your expenses. So real quick, roommate or rooms for rent, multifamily residential, commercial mixed use, Airbnb, and then housing cooperative. So that's 5 different ways that you can get into some rental strategies. Now, I'm just going to talk very briefly about some leasing things and some kind of pros and cons, and where you can get some information from. So key number 1 is there are releasing templates and things like that out there. So don't think that you have to make up everything from scratch. There's a lot that exists out there. You can start with those templates as a base. But the key to being successful in real estate is really having strong leasing agreements or roommate agreements in place. If you have been in real estate before and you did not have those things in place and you had a horrible experience, don't chalk it up to real estate, chalk it up to you, chalk it up to what you did wrong, and just be able to acknowledge that and move on and learn from it. Because sometimes what I hear is people who've had bad experiences in real estate try to like deter people. You don't want to be, fixing toilets in the middle of the night. Like, come on, guys. In your whole, existence of adulthood, how many times are you fixing a toilet in the middle of the night? Seriously, not gonna say that it won't happen, but I just want to know. You don't want to be dealing with busted pipes in the middle of the night. Like, if I could make 20 years of passive income, I can surely deal with the risk of a possible busted pipe every blue moon, because like those things don't just continuously happen. You know what I mean? So I find that people oftentimes make up these excuses in their minds for why they can't go and do this real estate thing, when the reality is it's just you. It's just you. It's just you. So putting a strong lease agreement in place is very key, very important to this process. The other part of that is, so actually what I want to add to that is there are groups that can help you. So I'm a part of probably 3 different like landlord groups that are on Facebook predominantly. I get a few emails, but there's a lot of information out there about best practices, clauses you can add in your lease, resources, depending on your state, especially when you get into some of these Facebook groups. People are coming from all over. Like, someone is going to be from your state and your area who can tell you what the laws are. You can go and double check and verify. They might have some access to some resources that you didn't even know exist. Like, we have to be able to use these platforms to help us make money and not just be social, right? So like, if I have a landlord question, I probably am going to go and hit up that landlord group and just see what other people who've been in the industry are doing. I respond to things on there and let people know, like, hey, this is where I've had success. This is where I will never do that shit again. Like, so we have to have those conversations. But there are a lot of groups that can help you to gain consensus and things like that on best practices or lease clauses that you can put inside of your lease to really solidify it and make it strong. The other part is, so that's basically like leases and agreements, like in a nutshell, right? So I know I said I was going to get back to those, but that's kind of all I have for you. Is you don't have to start from scratch. There are templates that are available, and then you can add to that lease by getting some consensus from other experienced landlords. Okay. And you certainly want to have it looked over by an attorney, especially one who's proficient in real estate law, so that you can be sure that your lease clauses are actually applicable, right? Because you don't want to take someone to court over something that technically isn't legal and you can't even hold them to. But, basically you can do a lot of the footwork yourself by gaining a template and then finding specific clauses that you want to add into it, merging that into one document, giving it to an attorney. That review fee, not that much, and then they'll review it, turn it back over to you, and now you feel very comfortable and confident that you have a strong, lease agreement in place. Then I talked about the groups. Okay, so the last thing is like DIY, basically do it yourself or get a manager. I've done it both, right? And especially if you end up doing rentals like out of state, you're just gonna need a manager for the most part. It is what it is. But the rule of thumb is that property managers charge roughly around 10% of the rent. So you want to make sure that you still have a margin in there to cover your rental expenses, to cover your property manager, and then still leave some for maintenance and some for profit. So if you think about that, I'm just running that down. If your unit is $1,000 that you're renting it for, your property manager is going to take $100. You're going to probably need to set aside $50 at least a month per unit at minimum. I actually like to set aside more than that, but I'm going to say at a minimum, set aside like from the jump, $50 a month per unit for maintenance and other things that come up. If you're paying utilities, you want to take that part out. So let's say, $50 for utilities, $50 for your set aside, $100 for your property manager. So now you're sitting at $800. Maybe you want to take $150 for you. So was that $7? So now you're sitting at $650, and so that means that your mortgage needs to be, or rent needs to be $650 or less in order for you to make a profit, right? So just kind of like think through what those numbers look like if you decide to go the manager route. But also, a good manager is going to make sure that they have a crew and a team for when those emergencies pop up. They're going to keep your unit filled. They're going to do all of your background checks. They're going to do all of that screening process for you. So, a solid manager will handle that for you, and in exchange, you give them a percentage of what your unit makes, right? Now, the screening process, that's deep. Oh, wait, let me back up. So if you decide to go DIY, if you decide to do it yourself and you decide not to bring in a manager, no problem. Like, you can collect your own rent. There's a lot of online ways that you can collect rent. You can have a mail-in system. You can go and pick it up. I mean, there's all different types of ways that you can essentially, do it as a DIY, right? There's a lot of ways that you can do that. But again, you just want to have like processes and systems really set up in order for you to maintain that. Yeah. And so I personally like to hire a manager, but if the margin is tight, I will do it myself. Or if I'm local, I'll do it myself, right? And it's really good to collect a lot of contacts. So the same way that your manager would have like a team on call, like if there's a plumbing issue, your property manager should not be like, oh, let me look up in the yellow pages. And do people use yellow pages anymore? No. I don't know. But your manager should not be like, let me go to Angie's list and find out, where there's a good plumber. Your property manager should have all those, a plumber, electrician, general contractor, handyman, like all those things should basically be on speed dial. So it's the same thing when you do a DIY. You need to build your team. You need to know who you're going to call when there's a problem. If it's not you, right? If you're handy, great. If you're not, you need to have those things laid out for you. So that's just the same thing going through an interview process. But once you've kind of locked in your general people who you like to go to, no problem. When there's an issue, the toilet backed up in the middle of the night, just call your plumber and move on with life. So, and those little, $50 that you're setting aside, that's exactly what those are for. So that there's a surplus in the account and you're not worried about it. If there's an issue, you can just call the professional, let them come out, let them take care of it, right? If you're a professional, you go out, you take care of it, you keep that money in your pocket. So that's kind of the difference between a DIY and getting a manager. You definitely need to screen your manager. I have been taken from a manager. So if y'all are in Detroit, do not ever use Kyle Hosley. Just gonna throw his name out there. I just threw that man straight under the bus. He got me, y'all. Got me. Good. I usually actually don't do that. I don't know why I did that. I'm not even going to edit it out. We're just going to roll with it. But I actually usually never throw Black businesses under the bus, but I'm going to throw him under the bus. Don't use him. He got me for real, for like several $1,000s. That's my bad, right? Okay, so the last thing is the screening process. So I mentioned the intuition. So here's the thing. There's a lot of landlord, like basic landlord softwares out there that will allow you to run like criminal background checks and things like that. Background checks, credit checks, you can run references, you can call, jobs, you can get leasing histories, all of those things, right? And then you just have like gut feelings. This person sits right with me, they don't. I don't like this person's attitude. Culture is everything, especially in a roommate situation, right? But screening in general is a big part of the process. You just have to be thorough about your screening process and be upfront and okay with whatever it is that you feel like you need in order to make sure that you are comfortable with signing a contract with this person. I know that this is something that I had done over in Detroit, was like not really worry about renters having insurance. Like, I will never do that again. Not that I've even had any issues. It's just like a best practice that as a renter, they should have rental insurance. And I've been required to provide rental insurance in most places that I've rented. And yet I still felt some kind of way about enforcing that on my tenants, right? So like, never feel any way about enforcing something that is in your best interest for yourself. So that was a lesson learned for me. So I'm passing that lesson on to you, right? So just make sure that you go in and think about the things that you want to require. Make sure those things are in place. Make sure those things are inside of the lease. And if you have someone who doesn't like your requirements, as long as they're stated up front, hey, you don't have to go through the rest of the process. Right? So you can also make somebody pay for those things. I mean, that's essentially what application fees are for. Application fees mean I can pull your credit, pull your background, and the fee that it costs for me to do that, you are eating up that fee. So, it's okay for you to do that. That's a best practice, like run with it, right? You do not have to refund back anybody's application fee, even if they don't get the place. But as a good practice, and just, how karma works, like, don't just be taking people's application. If you know you ain't finna rent to them, just let them keep their application fee and put that somewhere else, to someone who may rent to them. So, y'all, that was a whole lot of information. It was just information. I just wanted to get that out there because, again, we just have to have these strategies, and all the topics are just not always sexy. And I want to throw that out there, right? But here's what I love. I did a topic on, basically business 101, like how you get your business started. Now that video didn't have like a ton of views, but it was quality because I got a lot of questions and feedback. So I'm hoping, it's my hope, that this is also one of those quality videos that, if you're in this space, like, this resonates with you and it speaks to you, right? Because we're here to talk about wealth building, intergenerational wealth, money, mindset, all of those things in the Black community. And what I recognize just from my own experiences is that quite a bit of us don't really know how to get into the real estate game, but we want to be there. And so this is one way you can get into the real estate game. This is my experience of getting into the real estate game. And so I just want to come back and, share that experience with you. So I hope that you found this very helpful. I'm going to throw out the last of my plugs as we wrap this podcast on up, but y'all know what it is. This is Jice with Boss Up with BBI. You guys can make sure to go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe, share this information out. If you are looking at going into the real estate industry, if you know someone who's talked about it, share this information out to them. They may find it useful. They may need this information, and then again, I just want to encourage you, if you have questions, comments, something to add to the conversation, drop it in the comments. I read those comments. I come back, I try to answer things. So make sure that you leave, something in the comments if you have questions and things like that. And I will do my very best to get back to you and answer your questions to the best of my ability. So that's it, y'all. That's a wrap. Make sure that you go over and text BlackAgenda to 484848. Make sure you go to the BlackAgendaOnTour.com to find out when we're coming near you. Make sure that you hit subscribe, hit share, and of course, if you want to work with me one-on-one, you head over to Patreon at Grind with Jice, and we can get connected. So I thank y'all for joining me. Make sure that you hit that subscribe and share. I'm going to say it one more time. Make sure you hit that subscribe and share. This platform has really been growing. It's been growing very steadily. I just want to shout out and thank you guys for that. But I also want to make sure that we continue to grow, really, continue to grow and grow at a really steady pace. I'm working hard to provide you with that valuable information. So if you have those questions, make sure that you send them over to me. I will do my best to answer them. I will do my best to give you guys topics and things that you're looking forward to. I do want to drop this in on you guys. My last word, promise you, my last word. I want to drop this in. I'm going to be talking about the gig economy with futurist Chet Sisk. Like, you guys are not going to want to miss this, because we need to understand where our economy is headed and why it's important for us to be able to create these passive income streams, and why it's important for us to understand these rental strategies, because we're going to need to have some of these things as our economy is already in the process of changing. It's already there. So I'm going to have him on. I'm very excited about that interview, and I hope that you were subscribed and joined and shared so that you can get notifications when that interview drops. But it is going to be a good one for you to really think about where the landscape of our economy is going to be here in the near future, and begin to properly prepare for it. So once again, y'all, it's your girl Jice with Boss Up with BBI, and I will talk to you next time. Peace.